Greetings. The Fulbright Association is pleased to welcome all our attendees today for this Fulbright Forum in honor of Pride Month. It's entitled, How Queer? The Importance of Community Building and Chosen Families. The Fulbright Association extends the Fulbright International Exchange into a lifelong experience for U.S. alumni. We connect alumni and friends of the Fulbright program through lifelong learning, collaborative networking, and service projects at home and abroad. There are 54 local chapters. The Fulbright Association hosts more than 230 regional and national programs each year for visiting Fulbrighters and alumni throughout the United States. This year's programming is particularly special since it is the 75th anniversary of the Fulbright program. Focused on cross-cultural issues, the Fulbright Forum series features extraordinary presenters from around the world. Our presenters today are Aleksandar Kajmakoski, Robbie Goldman, Dr. Connor Shine, and Kevin Lamb. The Fulbright Association is pleased that this forum is being offered by Fulbright Prism. Fulbright Prism is an independent international NGO empowering LGBTQ Fulbrighters to be #out in the world. Now I will hand it over to Aleksandar for today's forum.
I'm Aleksandar. I am Fulbright Prism's Programming Coordinator, and I want to thank everybody for joining us today for this panel. This is Pride Month, so I guess I should start off by saying Happy Pride to everybody. I have my Pride shirt on, fit for the event, and I'm really excited for everybody to be joining us tonight. We have a lot of really cool, unique perspectives to offer everybody, and people that have kind of done Fulbrights in different parts of the world and have vastly different experiences. So I'm really excited that one, we get to share our really beautiful and rich experiences with everybody else, but that also people get to kind of learn more about the cool things that we did. So as the title of the panel tonight indicates, we're going to be talking a lot about community and the importance of community building and chosen families, which is kind of a very unique experience to a lot of queer people worldwide, because as we kind of know, homophobia and transphobia can kind of make our lives a little bit more difficult than they really should be, because what a lot of other people often see as, for lack of better words, depravity in us, being queer has so much beauty and so much richness, and provides so many people with so much, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with being queer, with being part of the LGBTQ community. For a lot of us, I think it has made our lives more meaningful and more rich, and I'm so excited to get to share all of that with all of you. So I guess I'll start. I kind of said my name's Aleksandar. I use any pronouns as long as they're used respectfully, so they, he, she, whatever. And any pronouns means any and all pronouns, so not just he. Feel free to mix it up sometimes. I did my Fulbright in Skopje, Macedonia in 2018 and 2019. So I guess when I moved to Macedonia on my Fulbright, I was doing a research grant, and I was originally going to be looking at the social determinants that lead people to choose different healing modalities for mental illness. So looking at either pharmaceuticals or biomedicine. And I got there, started with the work. It was sort of difficult to engage with, and kind of by chance, I became friends with a few queer people that introduced me to an organization called Subversive Front that does a lot of cool work in increasing healthcare equity for queer people in Macedonia. And while I was there, I became involved with them, and my project kind of shifted. So I actually ended up focusing more of my research time looking at the queer resiliency in the face of systemic discrimination. And so this was really cool, because I should backtrack a little bit. My family is originally from Macedonia, and so I was born and raised in the States, but had been back very often growing up. And so I was able to kind of get in there and sort of get on with my work right away. And so I was able to meet a lot of cool people. But something that while I was there was sort of difficult for me was there wasn't a lot of super out open queer spaces because Macedonia, while I have so much love for it and it is like my heritage and all that stuff, isn't the most queer friendly. And so I know growing up for me, I struggled a lot with my queerness and kind of coming to terms with it because I was like, I'm the only queer Macedonian in the diaspora and there's nobody like me, and I didn't see any like visibility representation of who I am as a person out, and queer people were often the butt of the joke. So I almost kind of made it my mission to like be hyper visible and kind of create these communities and these spaces for people so that way everybody could just live their authentic selves and live their best lives. And so I sort of helped start Macedonia's first drag scene, which was a lot of fun. So while I was doing all this research and this really, really cool stuff with healthcare equity and kind of increasing LGBTQ rights in Macedonia and sort of formulating my activism that way and kind of building safe spaces for queer people in professional settings. So I did all that by day, and then by night I was putting myself in drag and going and performing and just kind of hanging out with a bunch of people and showing them like what it meant to be queer. And so that was one of the coolest experiences, I think, from my Fulbright. And it is a time that I still kind of talk about all the time today. Because honestly, when you get me to start going about it, I kind of can't shut up because it was one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life. And so I kind of started the scene with 3 other people where once a month we were doing a drag show and we were hosting it. And it was kind of difficult to kind of get off the ground because there's a lot of things that we had to kind of figure out with in terms of funding. And luckily there were a lot of queer nonprofits in Skopje that were willing to help us out with that. And another big difficulty was finding the space for it. Because like I said, Macedonia is a fairly homophobic country and not everybody wanted a lot of queer people dancing in their clubs. We did one show and it went off beautifully, and it kind of brought a lot of people like had reached out to me afterwards, and they told me about how much like vibrancy it brought to the community and about how like the entire capital had a sort of like different energy around it that was kind of buzzing because like we were doing something that had never been done before. And after our second show, and our second show was the end of January, after the second show, there was sort of an article written about the show that we did that was very, very poorly misinformed and kind of was very, very sensationalized and like talked about how these naked queer people were funded by the government to kind of spread this Western like mission of the LGBTQ rights. And it was kind of a funny article at the time. A few of us that were part of the scene were a little bit scared because like it was this thing of like pictures were sort of published everywhere and it was like a big hot topic. But it didn't get us to stop because it was so important to us to just keep going and keep building this community and making these spaces for people to come and enjoy themselves, because they were spaces where like for the first time so many people like were just able to come, like regardless of whether they were gay or lesbian or bi or trans or non-binary or whatever, and we were all able to just kind of collectively come together and celebrate ourselves and be with ourselves in a space. And it was really, really beautiful to witness. And so that all kind of happened. And then towards the, as my time progressed, I actually ended up helping organizing Macedonia's first ever Pride Parade in 2019, which took a lot of effort. Organizing a Pride protest, Pride parade, Pride campaign, whatever you want to call it, is difficult. There are a lot of moving parts. And it's been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. And I actually ended up hosting the entire thing in drag, which up to this point, there were no like drag queens or kings or things in the public sphere. And so I remember 3 days or 2 days before the Pride parade, I had done like a little Instagram takeover on the Skopje Pride Instagram, and I had talked about how I was going to be the hostess for Pride and for people to come check me out, because while I looked more or less like I do now, I was like, I'm not going to be looking like this on the day of Pride. But because Macedonian is a very gendered language, and I use the feminine form of hostess, I got a lot of people in my DMs, and there was a lot of hate messages, a lot of death threats, a lot of like scary stuff that you don't want to be dealing with at the end of your Fulbright grant term. Luckily, I had a lot of friends and family that were very, very supportive and kind of helped me through that. And I remember the morning of Pride, June 29th, 2019, I was so terrified while I was getting ready in the morning. And I woke up super, super early. I think it was like 3 a.m. and I didn't have to be at the park until 11:30 a.m. So I was up 8.5 hours early. And I remember getting ready and just being absolutely terrified, because we were also told that there was going to be a counter protest happening at the same time that we were doing this. And I remember getting in the car in this like huge outfit. Like I was in like a super wide dress. I was in 8-inch heels. I was like in a wig, like tights, like everything. And I remember being terrified. Like I remember being shaking. And when we drove up to where the protest was starting, where the Pride Parade was starting, there were so many people, because we only expected there to be 300 to 500 people. And it ended up being that over 2,000 people showed up, which for Macedonia, which is a really, really tiny country, really, really meant a lot. And there was just, it was this moment in time that I still hold so dearly in my heart, because it was so many people that were just like out in the public space that like had been too scared to like do anything. And I had always said that like, regardless of what happens, I want to like impact at least one person. If like one person that's growing up can like see me and what I'm doing, and they can find the bravery and the courage in themselves to kind of go out and live their life the way that they wanted to, I wanted to do that. And community building is just so important, and it's so, especially to queer people, like so it's just, without the communities that we build, it's life is difficult, because so often we rely on ourselves, because like as much as allies and like friends and family that aren't queer want to support us and want to help us, sometimes there's just this level of like understanding that they can't get, because they don't understand the nuances. They don't understand what it's like to have to kind of go through this. And so Fulbright really kind of informed my work and my outlook and my perspective, and these experiences like truly taught me like the importance of community and how important chosen families are, because at the end of the day, I wouldn't have been able to do any of what I did without the people that were part of my chosen family, without their constant love and support, and just kind of the way that they held me through my toughest times, both through Fulbright, but also just kind of like all this work that I was doing. It's something that I think for queer people we hold very, very differently. I kind of want to open it up to questions now. If people have questions, they can submit them in the Q&A and I'll answer them. I'll give like 5 minutes for questions, and then I'll introduce the next panelist. So Cassian Faubel, and I'm very sorry if I'm mispronouncing names, asks if I could talk about what sort of support or criticism from Fulbright and Fulbright folks in Macedonia. So I didn't necessarily tell Fulbright that I was doing drag and that kind of stuff, because it didn't necessarily impact my grant at all. That being said, the people in the embassy in Macedonia, I was very close to, and they would reach out a lot to kind of check up on me, and make sure I was doing okay. And so I got a lot of support from them, in sort of doing this work. And they were very receptive when I kind of had to switch grant proposals. And there were also people from Fulbright in Macedonia that would like attend some of the drag shows and kind of like come out and support. And so in my experience, it was like a very, very supportive environment. I think the issues that I dealt with most were more from like people in Macedonia and just like general perspectives of what it meant to be queer, because like through a lot of my work, what I found was that people weren't necessarily homophobic and transphobic because they genuinely hated me, and who I was. A lot of times it was like just this, they had never met a queer person before. All of their opinions and thoughts about queer people were based off of stereotypes that they had heard growing up or that they saw on TV. And I remember doing a workshop when I was doing a healthcare equity training in Macedonia for social workers. And I remember this man saying, well, I've never met a queer person before. They don't exist. And I remember sitting there and I was like, I mean, I'm here. And he goes, yeah, but like, you're from America. Even if you're Macedonian, like have Macedonian roots, like you're from America, like they just don't exist here. And I remember saying to him, like, that's not true. They exist. You just haven't met a queer person that's been out to you, that's been open about their queerness, because like there's so much stigma and bias around being queer that like they just didn't probably feel comfortable to be out. And it was this thing of like, it was this like, not to like go into like stereotypes or anything, but it was this like super big, strong macho man that kind of took a step back and was like, oh, and it kind of made him think, because it's like, well, like, yeah, not everybody's going to come out to you, because like if there's not a culture and environment that makes it safe for people to be out and to live authentically as themselves, they're not going to. Because at the end of the day, as much as I would love for everybody to be out in the world, and to express themselves however they want, it's also this like realization that people also need to put their safety first, and they need to put this like self preservation first before anything else. Because at the end of the day, if they don't do that, they're putting themselves in harm's way. And that's kind of where this idea of like community building and chosen families comes in, because it's in those spaces that we create ourselves with people that are like ourselves, that we're able to be who we want to be, and we're able to explore gender identity and sexuality and things. And there's nothing inherently wrong in that. I think that kind of freedom is what allows people to be themselves. And I want to live in a world where, like, this is just like a personal thing for me. Like, I want to live in a world where everybody identifies as queer. Like, I want everybody to be like, yeah, I'm like this or I'm that or whatever. Like, I want that, because I think so many people think that they're not queer because they also, not that I'm like conspiracy theory or anything, but it's like, it's this thing of like, people don't allow themselves to explore it. For so long, I kind of made sure like I guarded myself from myself. Things that like interested me and that I enjoyed, I wouldn't participate in, like drag. Like, I wouldn't do makeup or like wear nails or anything, because I was like, that's gay. Like, that's how I thought about it when I was younger, and I don't want to be gay. But when you create spaces for people to express themselves however they want in non-judgmental ways, and to kind of explore all of their options, it allows people to just live their lives the way that they want to live them. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And I wish more people kind of looked at it that way. That being said, I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to pass it on to Kevin, who was not able to join us tonight, but he pre-recorded his little video for things that he wanted to talk to you guys about. So I will have Munir play that. And then if you all have questions, I have his contact information that he gave me that I'll post in the chat. So if you guys want to reach out to him, feel free to.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Lam. My pronouns are he, him, and this year I'm completing my second year Fulbright ETA. I have been living in Taiwan for the past 2 years through the pandemic. It's fair to say that Taiwan has done a really good job at managing this crisis these past 2 years. Even with the outbreaks and cases these past 3 weeks. Because I've been here since the pandemic, I remember what it was like over a year and a half ago when the Fulbright program ended worldwide. I remember having to make the decision of staying in Taiwan or going back home to the US. Ultimately, I decided to stay here because things were running like normal. Shops were running, functions, restaurants were open. As the economy opens up again and the US is opening up again, it's ironic that things are shutting down here in Taiwan. And I'm at this point where I'm really reflecting on how do we come out of this pandemic, making sure we take both the advantages during the pandemic as well as before the pandemic and now after the pandemic to create a hybrid model that works for all of us today. Now, more than a year fast forward, Taiwan is unfortunately experiencing hundreds of COVID cases a day. However, the Taiwanese government has responded robustly. For example, we have been in a level 3 lockdown the past few weeks. That means restaurants are closed except for delivery. In Kaohsiung, where I live, you visit the supermarkets on certain days depending on whether your household registration number ends on an odd or an even number. And Taiwan has even gone so far as to spraying alcohol with trucks to make sure things are really cleaned out. But I'm most fortunate of the healthcare system here, knowing that it is well equipped to take in COVID patients as well as respond to this crisis. Now, I would like to talk to you about my time with Fulbright Prism, Taiwan. My biggest honor and privilege this year was working with 3 amazing individuals. Amelia, our research coordinator, Jack, our translator, and Aaron, our secretary. Amelia never fails to put a smile on our faces and really support the group's initiatives and endeavors. Aaron is a force of grounding energy that helps us keep the ball rolling, especially when we're in a rut. And Jack is our translator who knows how to have a good time as well as work hard. In these meetings, we always start off with a rose, bud, and thorn. This is our way of checking in with each other to make sure that everyone feels seen and feels heard. It is not easy working as a full-time Fulbright ETA, as well as serving as a part-time Fulbright Prism president. But they are both working towards the same objective, and that is community building. And in that way, my time here and the goals I'm working towards are inextricably linked. This team I get to work with is a privilege, but the results I've seen as we bring people from many different backgrounds together that would not have otherwise met is the gem. This year we hosted 2 in-person brunches, countless virtual events, and planned for a retreat on the east coast of Taiwan that was ultimately canceled. It is an understatement to say that this year has been challenging, but I have learned communities, especially queer communities, are resilient. Beyond my role as Fulbright Prism president, I've enjoyed using Tinder to make gay friends. As an artist myself, a dancer, I found myself gravitating towards becoming friends with other artists. I've noticed these friends of mine always sought to seek social change in their work, as well as see themselves reflected in their work or other people's works, especially as marginalized folks. That's something that we can understand as marginalized folks in the US. As Pride Month is coming to an end, I think about the shoulders of giants that we stand on, while also imagining the future we are working towards. As an American living abroad in Taiwan, I recognize the privilege of coming from the US and living in Taiwan, states that have both legalized gay marriage. Although we have a lot of progress to make, we have come a long way. But that is not to say I don't experience the occasional mockery on the streets when I'm holding my partner's hand, or I get glimpsed, or I get stared at. But on a day-to-day basis, I know that I am safe. Our queer family abroad, as well in the US, struggled to embody / live their authentic truth today. So it is our responsibility as people who are privileged to collectively work towards a future imagined by our people and community, while not forgetting about the past and holding on to the present time. As an ETA, I was comfortable only coming out to a few of my staff members. In the beginning of the year, while introducing myself to the local English teachers, in my PowerPoint presentation, I said, I am gay. In hindsight, I should have known it would have drawn backlash. Afterwards, I was confronted by my LETs that I should stay in the closet from my students and other staff members. However, as the first semester came to a close, one of my LETs noticed I developed a really good relationship with the staff members, and she gave me the permission to tell them. This is a gray area. As a gay, Asian American, polyamorous man, I know my narrative is not written. It is not made to be made small by Western media and centuries of colonial and neo-colonial imperialism. My overlapping identities, whether it is my Asian identity or my queer identity, when it meets at a crossroad, it is potent for dynamic change. Although gray areas can be a point of contention, they can also be leveraged. And by gray areas, I mean, as a gay educator, although it is taboo to be gay, as an educator, I am automatically granted and given respect by my students, as well as by my teacher, as well as by staff. So when students make homophobic comments in the classroom, I take that opportunity and turn it into a lesson or a lecture. Usually it's done in Chinese. I tell my students why it is not okay to put other people down, especially queer people down. And when my Chinese fails me, luckily my LET comes in and fills in the gaps. In terms of a friendly working space, it was not a problem being gay because most of my staff members didn't know I was gay. But I have agency in finding other queer staff members and becoming friends with them, and then secretly sharing with them my identity. I also enjoyed finding allies at school, especially with my principals. On Tuesdays, I would go into his office and sip tea with him and just talk for hours, eventually slipping in that I was gay. Amongst all of these spaces that I participated in, whether it was the Fulbright UTA community, my schools, and the community, I realized and am steadfast in the belief that we have everything we need to manifest the kind of queer community we want to live in ourselves. Thank you so much.
I just want to hop in real fast and give a huge thank you to Kevin, who, although was not able to make it tonight with us live, he took the time to pre-record that video. He did have, he gave me his contact information. So he gave me his email and his Instagram. And so I'll post those in the chat. That way, if anybody has any questions for him or wants to engage with him or talk about his experiences more in depth, you guys can feel free to reach out and talk to him. Next, I am going to introduce Robbie.
Thank you, Alexander, and hi, everybody. I'm Robbie Goldman. I use he, him pronouns. I did my Fulbright in 2016 in Christchurch, New Zealand. I am a volcanologist by training, someone who studies volcanoes, and hence my background is of Hawaii's Kilauea volcano. There was a lava eruption that started back in December. It concluded this past month, and just in time for Pride Month, there's this lovely double rainbow that appeared. And so I got permission from my co-authors / mentors at the U.S. Geological Survey to use this image just for the purpose of having it in my background. But I'm here on the panel today as an individual. I don't represent the U.S. Geological Survey in any way, but I do research with them as part of my PhD program. So to begin, I'm on this panel today because I am a chapter president for the United States-based West Coast chapter of Fulbright Prism. So currently we have 3 regional chapters. As you heard from Kevin, there's a chapter in Taiwan. I'm the president of the chapter that focuses broadly on the states of California, Oregon, and Washington. And you'll hear from Dr. Connor Shine in a little bit about their efforts in Ireland. And for me, my involvement with Fulbright Prism both coincided with the start of the pandemic at the beginning of 2020. And it was also part of my own coming out journey. I did not come out publicly until adulthood. And actually, in terms of being like completely out, I only came out this time 2 years ago, so very recently. I was out to my family growing up though, and a few close friends. I grew up in Los Angeles, where I'm actually based right now, Los Angeles, California. So for me, my story is actually, it contrasts from Alexander's with regard to being in a place that is more queer friendly than Macedonia, but at the same time, having grown up during a time, the 90s and 2000s, when there was a lot of established homophobia, where I and other boys my age were told, it wasn't smart to hold hands, with friends or whoever, if there were guys as well. Proposition 8, which passed the same year that Barack Obama was elected president, effectively banned gay marriage in the state of California until the state Supreme Court overturned it in 2013. And it wasn't until I graduated from college that same-sex marriage became the law of the land nationwide. And so I guess I recognize that there's been a lot of evolution within the United States, as well as globally, on issues of queer rights. And I think my own evolution with my own coming to terms with my own queer identity has kind of followed along with that progress. I guess my own personality is one where I try not to stand out in the crowd unless I have a really strong incentive or motivation to. I like to play by the rules, so to speak. And so for me personally, I think that mentality held me back from coming out in contexts where I was perfectly safe and able to, especially attending a liberal arts college, Pomona College, during my undergrad years. So getting into my involvement with Fulbright and Fulbright Prism, I was not out during my Fulbright in New Zealand, but I did come out to my housemates who I was living with, who were from different parts of the world, all very accepting. And I also ended up going on a little road, or not little, a road trip towards the end of my Fulbright with another queer friend whom I met through a Indigenous Maori kapa haka, or a performance art class. And so this friend and I, we actually bonded a lot over queer related issues. It was kind of the first time that I really got to, or it was the first time on my Fulbright where I really got to dive into those issues in depth. And I think for me, it was just having that personal connection where I really got to explore or better understand who I was and where I fit into queer communities, was something that I would take with me when coming into 2020 when the pandemic started. And so because of the fact that all of our social interactions here in the US became very sharply curtailed due to shutdowns, I was determined to find a way to build a queer community of sorts. I had actually moved around quite a bit since my Fulbright. I'm a student at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I'm still a student there, but I've been working remotely for the last 2 years. Having grown up in Los Angeles, I realized personally that I wanted to be in a more metropolitan area. It was just what I was more comfortable with. And also during my early years of grad school, I'd really struggled with finding a supportive community, which is really important for those of you who are academics. It's really important to have that supportive community to get you through the really difficult slog and the very competitive and critical nature of academic work. And so at the beginning of 2020, I had a personal goal to build a queer community of some sort in Portland, Oregon, where I was originally going to be based. However, when the pandemic started, I decided to be with my family since I didn't know how the whole pandemic was going to shake out. But then I took the opportunity. I had remembered looking up Fulbright Prism the year before, but starting in April of last year, I reached out to Tim, who's the president of Fulbright Prism as a whole, expressing my interest in starting a chapter here in the US West Coast. And I ended up being the moderator, being in Aleksandar's position a year ago for a Pride panel. And I also just want to shout out to Connor for reaching out to me after that panel. And I got to connect more with queer folks in Fulbright as the year went on. And I'd like to shout out to Meg, who's in audience right now, who expressed interest in joining the West Coast Prism Chapter and brought along her friend, who was also a panelist in last year's panel, Faith Brown, to help me really get the chapter rolling. And so I would say that Meg and Faith have really been instrumental in helping me feel more a part of the queer community, since my own process of being part of that community has been sort of a slow and at times difficult one for me. But with Faith and Meg's help and support, I've really been able to just feel free to be myself, and also to provide a space for Fulbrighters in the US West Coast, and also just in the US in general, opportunity to interact with us here, our reviews of various queer media, attend a few Zuma related events that we had. And by the way, we have a drag brunch coming up at the end of the month. So it's going to be the final Saturday, so a week from this coming Saturday. And it's going to be hosted by the wonderful Faith Brown, who will be in drag. And it'll be a fun time. We hope to see a bunch of people there. So I want to be mindful of time here. I will open it up to Q&A. Okay, so I see a question here from Cassian about whether there's a Fulbright Prism Midwest chapter. Okay, so right now there's only one formal US regional chapter, and that's the one that I'm currently president of. But I think there's certainly an interest in having more regional chapters. I personally have a friend who's based in Chicago who's also a queer Fulbrighter, who I think would be interested, maybe not in leading the chapter, but certainly in having that presence. I think the main logistical issue is just having Fulbrighters who both are aware of Prism and who have the time and energy to dedicate towards getting that initiative started. I know from my own experience, if it wasn't for Meg and Faith helping me out, I'm not sure I would have the chapter in the state that it is right now, because it does take effort to get the, both the social media presence and the email newsletter preference, to make the connections, and to just have that moral support, like what Kevin was talking about in his video about having these regular check-ins with his teammates, and having them lift each other up. So I'd say there's certainly space to have a Midwest chapter. I would definitely be supportive of a Midwest chapter starting. But since I'm not personally based in the Midwest at this time, that's something that I think is just going to have to be left up to people in the area who know of Prism and express an interest. Oh, great. Cassian, actually, I'm going to put my email on here, so you and any other audience members who are interested in learning more, definitely feel free to reach out. All right, with that, I'm happy to move on unless there are any other questions.
Yep, so I can take over now and share kind of my experience and my involvement with Fulbright and Fulbright Prism. So hi everyone, I'm Connor. I use they, he pronouns, and I'm based in Ireland, on the west coast of Ireland, in a city called Galway, which I'm sure probably quite a few of you might be familiar with. So I did my Fulbright in 2016-17, and I was based in MIT in Massachusetts, where I did 8 months research as part of my PhD project. So my background is biomedical engineering. So when I was young in school, I always really liked biology and science and physics. So the biomed side of engineering was kind of what drew me towards those things. And I did the 8 months research over in MIT, looking at computer models and experimental tests for biodegradable materials for use in cardiovascular stents. So it's kind of the area that I'm still involved in since I finished up my PhD, and I'm working in industry in Galway at the moment. So as Robbie mentioned, I'm the president chapter, the chapter president of the new chapter in Ireland, Fulbright Prism Ireland. And I've been in that role since last November. So we're quite a new chapter as well, and I'm delighted to be involved and really honoured to be involved with Fulbright Prism and kind of support the great work they do in Ireland and supporting LGBT plus Fulbrighters. So I think from my own experience, probably similar to what Robbie was saying, I was spent my Fulbright time in a place that was probably more queer accepting, possibly even more queer accepting than what I had experienced to date growing up in Ireland. So before I went to my Fulbright, I wasn't really sure about my gender identity. I was still figuring quite a lot of that out, and I was kind of still coming to terms, I think, with the discomfort and the unhappiness that I soon realized was gender dysphoria, and kind of I just started, I suppose, putting stuff together a couple of months before I went to Boston. So when I was in MIT, it was a really great experience to meet kind of people that would help me along my journey. So I got quite involved with the LGBT plus community in MIT. And it was actually the first couple of months I was there, I was invited to a weekend of workshops in Provincetown. So I did the thing, I went to P-Town for a weekend, which was really a great experience. And I also met quite a lot of really great people through the Fulbright while I was there. So a lot of Irish people that were kind of working in the Boston area that had previously done Fulbrights. I linked up with them. And then I also met a lot of people at different enrichment seminars and stuff as well. So I think definitely coming back from my Fulbright allowed me to do some community building when I returned to Ireland. And it definitely gave me a sense of appreciation for the importance of community and having the community there with you. Both in terms of kind of working through stuff and figuring out your gender, your sexuality, or kind of just different parts of yourself that you might need to take time to reflect on and work through. And also in terms of academic life, so trying to finish up and get finished up with college and a PhD. And then just in terms of, I suppose, supporting the people in your community that also need help and lifting up. So I kind of started the process of transitioning after I returned to Ireland, and I changed my name into college with my supervisors and stuff, which was actually a really great experience. I was quite nervous speaking to my, I suppose, kind of would have been older kind of supervisor who was my main supervisor, and I was quite nervous having that conversation with him, but it went really well, and he was very much, okay, we'll focus on the pronouns and we'll get the pronouns right, and they were very happy to switch to using Connor for me. I think it was quite a strange experience transitioning during the PhD. It definitely gave me some, they were very supportive and gave me some time to, I suppose, kind of get stuff set up and then kind of to get back on track with writing my thesis and stuff. So I was very appreciative of that. And then also my involvement with the Fulbright community in Ireland has been extremely positive. The Irish Fulbright Alumni Association, they've actually come on board. So I've been working with them to set up the Fulbright Prism Ireland chapter, and they've been a really, really great support network to us. So the different events that the IFAA do throughout the year, they do an awards dinner in Dublin Castle, usually over the summer, but we had a virtual one online this year. which was very it was definitely a COVID experience to have. And then we did a Thanksgiving dinner. So when I came back from Boston and I had begun transitioning, there were events that I was quite nervous about going to, but then when I realized it was going to be, say, Fulbrighters and fellow Fulbrighters and new awardees and alumni, I knew that it was going to be a really accepting place and that I could just go and be myself and everybody would be totally fine. I could just be comfortable and kind of enjoy the event and catch up with friends and catch up with people. So I think once I'd finished up in college and I kind of had a bit more headspace to kind of figure out what work I wanted to get involved in, I became aware of Fulbright Prism. I think it was 2019 I first seen their stuff online. And then when I was working with both with the IFAA board, and then I'm a member of the Fulbright Ireland Diversity, Equity and Inclusion group as well. It was kind of through work there that I got in touch with Tim at Fulbright Prism and just spoke about the possibility of setting up a chapter in Ireland. So it's been really great. We had our launch event in March and we're hoping to plan a couple more events now throughout the year. So it's been a really nice time. And I'd also like to thank the Fulbright Association for asking me to speak this evening. It's always really nice to connect to the community and to meet fellow Fulbrighters. And also I think my own involvement with the wider LGBT+ community in Galway has kind of, I suppose, highlighted the importance of having people there that you can share experiences with and kind of bounce ideas and stuff off. So yeah, I'm really glad to be here this evening. I'll just check and see if there's many questions. I don't think if there's any there, unless I can't see them on my device. Possibly.
Connor, I'll go ahead and ask you a question.
Yes, please.
So have you had many opportunities during this pandemic to actually have, or at least in the last few months, have any in-person events, or have you been mostly doing virtual at this point?
It's mostly been virtual, yeah. So I think it'll probably be online stuff for the next couple of months, hoping to do some more maybe social media shout outs and kind of do some Q&As on Instagram. But yeah, I'm also involved with Galway Pride. So it's the local LGBT+ Pride here. And our Pride is in August, so it's a little later than many of the big prides. And we're kind of planning a hybrid mix of online events and then in-person events. So yeah, the drag brunch sounds like a fantastic idea, actually, Robbie.
Yeah, if you want to register, feel free. We're trying to open it up to the broader community, especially since it's virtual.
Yeah, that's, I suppose, one of the great advantages of being able to have a wider audience for events.
Right, absolutely.
Yes, I wasn't sure if there's any further questions in the chat. I couldn't catch any there. Oh yeah, yay for supportive supervisors. I know, it's great.
If Munir can open up everybody's cameras, because there's not a lot of people in here, so if we want to spend the next 5 or 10 minutes kind of chatting, that might be a nice way to kind of put us not in this weird super restrictive wall, and kind of make us a little bit more accessible to people. I do while he's doing that, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank the Fulbright Association for having us, and I really want to thank Kevin and Robbie and Connor for joining us and sharing with us their experiences. I think we can all kind of say that as queer people, we are unfortunately societally a little bit predisposed to kind of going through it, for lack of a better phrase. But I think one of the coolest things about Fulbright Prism is because it's all virtual, and a lot of the programming is virtual, I think it kind of lends itself to being more accessible and being more open, and allowing people that maybe aren't quite sure where they fit in with us, allowing them to kind of explore those options. And honestly, a lot of us that kind of grew up with technology sort of booming, sort of found queer communities digitally before we found them in real life. And so I think it's kind of cool that we're sort of able to get back to that in some ways with Fulbright Prism being all virtual. And I do just want to touch on like, community building is hard. Community building is not easy. And I think like we can all kind of attest to the fact that it takes time, like, and I don't know, but like, it's one of those things where like, I don't know, maybe it's like the journey is more important than the destination, you know? And like it's about the people you meet along the way, quite literally, especially when we're talking about chosen families and community building and things like that. And I think the most we can all do is just kind of support one another and love on one another, because as queer people, we all have so much to offer and we bring so many unique perspectives. And like, I mean, right here, like everybody listened to four different people talk about four different experiences, and there's no one experience that we should all have, and there's no one thing that we should all do. And like, that's, I think, the beauty, for me at least, about being queer. And Robbie and Connor, feel free to chime in, or anybody else, like feel free to chime in the chat or on camera or whatever. I think that's the beauty for me, is that like, there is no one experience, there is no same experience. And I think that's the beauty of like being queer, is that because everybody already thinks we're weird and everybody already thinks we're other and we're different and we're bad. So you know what, like roll with it. It gives us more freedom to be the people that we want to be, to live in our queer utopia where we're all able to like authentically live as ourselves and be ourselves and not have to worry about like being that weird person. Like, yeah, I'm weird, so let's lean into it. If nobody has anything to say, I do just want to plug two upcoming events. One, like Robbie mentioned, on June 26th, they have the drag show, or the drag brunch, which I think will be a really, really fun and exciting time. And then on June 21st, I will be hosting a keynote with Alex Jenny, who is a trans therapist, often referred to as the drag therapist because she also does drag. She is also a friend of mine and is really, really cool. And we'll be talking about trans joy and trans supremacy and what it means to live as a trans person in this world that is not so receptive of transness, but talks about how much beauty and love and joy there is to be found in being trans, and having your own hand in kind of creating who you want to be as a person. So that'll be July 21st. And yeah, I just kind of want to thank everybody for coming and for attending. I know it was an event later in the night, especially for Connor, who I think is like up kind of late. I'm really, really sorry. But I'm really, really happy that everybody was able to attend, and I appreciate it. Also, happy Pride again.
Yeah, happy Pride. I don't think I added that in. Thanks for that information, Aleksandar, on the events. I'll definitely check out the one in July. Sounds really
Yeah,
cool.
real fast, I saw Cassian had said something in the chat about where we can find upcoming events. A lot of times the events are posted on the Fulbright Prism social media and through newsletters sent out. So I believe it is just Fulbright Prism on Instagram, all one word, but I'm checking that. Yeah, it is. And then the West Coast chapter is, sorry, I feel like I should know this better than I do. I'm sorry, everybody. I know that there are also people from Fulbright Prism that I work with that are watching. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll just post it right now. Just trying to get the exact hashtag.
Yeah. There is, here, hold on. I saw, chat, so if Michaela could answer that question, that would be fantastic. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Robbie, I like the logo as well for the Fulbright Prism, the West Coast chapter. I meant to say that to you before. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Or sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Cassian, if you can drop your email in the chat, I will contact you and send you a bunch of resources and stuff and like different places that you can contact us. Thank you.
Cassian,
so
I can drop my email as well. The West Coast Prism email. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's it for tonight. I don't know if the Fulbright Association had anything else to say.
Yeah, just thank you again for all the presenters. Round of applause. And this session is being recorded. We'll kind of touch up some of the parts, but it will be shared as a recording. It'll be online at fulbright.org/forum. And we will email it out as well. Just lastly, just want to thank the Fulbright Association members and donors who make all of our programming possible. And again, you can see any information at fulbright.org/forum. And have a great night. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Night, folks. Take care.